non, bah, ça va ici. Ça va ici. Non, non, c'est bon. C'est bon. Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, dear audience, I think you can see my name. I've never seen my name so big. So I'm very privileged and honored to welcome you here in the House of Switzerland on a journey that started more than 10 years ago at the first Swiss Global Digital Summit under the auspices of Federal Councillor Ueli Maurer and Digital Switzerland. Major achievements have been made. Let me congratulate the Swiss Digital Initiative under the great leadership of President Doris Leuthard, as well as Niniane Pefken, the Managing Director, and all the stakeholders from academia and the private sector, for today's launch of the Digital Trust label at the World Economic Forum. You represent very best Swiss values. First, you stick to your promises, and secondly, you prove resilience by delivering even under difficult circumstances. When the international system and national political orders are under severe stress, as well as game-changing new technologies appear at the same time, the most important task is to regain trust and security. The digital age is often compared with the deeply disruptive effect of the railway infrastructure on economies, societies, and states. In the early days, collapsing bridges and train wrecks were frequent. The railways would have never gained broad acceptance if bridges would have continued to collapse regularly. The world needed better bridge builders, engineers, and Switzerland had a few of them. Today, we need bridge builders, technical and diplomatic engineers who can bring together the building blocks for a safe, open, and free digital world. This is also at the heart of the Swiss digital foreign policy. And it's quite dangerous to build bridges if you don't have the science. Highest quality of research and practitioners that can apply the research to the real world. That is why the Swiss government is also investing a lot of resources in science diplomacy. Switzerland and International Geneva had already strong assets in this field. With the Geneva Science and Diplomacy Anticipator, GESDA, these efforts have been brought now to a new level of ambition. We have to kickstart a virtuous circle of digital trust, strengthen cybersecurity, and higher security level, promoting again trust in the digital world. The Digital Trust label can be a strong driving force. I'm convinced it will. New technologies ask for new actors to be part of new solutions. Swiss foreign digital policy will build very strongly on partnerships with the private sector and academia. I'm very proud that representatives from Swiss private sector and science have actively contributed to the creation of the Digital Trust label, and are also pioneers in the application of the label in the real world. The COVID-19 pandemic and the war in Ukraine have made us dramatically aware that digital tools can't solve the problems of the real world alone. Without a strong underlying set of values and institutions that guarantee freedom, human rights, and humanitarian principles and protect our environment of our planet, no app, no label will do. But digital tools can be an incredible force for good if inspired and applied with the ethical standards and values. One of the participants of the first Swiss Digital Summit, Brad Smith, president of Microsoft, said, "When we reflect upon the question, what are the values we want innovation to serve, I personally think that one of the best places to search for the answers is in Switzerland and in Geneva. And it's what I call the spirit of Geneva," end of citation. Your work inspires and encourages us to increase our diplomatic commitments in the field of cybersecurity. The Geneva Dialogue for Responsible Behavior in Cyberspace, where we bring the private sector and norm-setting authorities together, is already a very concrete example. Trust doesn't just appear out of the blue. It builds up slowly but steadily. Based on strong values and smart norm shaping, a global digital governance can evolve and sustain trust for the future. Let me finish by a recent documentary I saw about the first docking of a US and a Soviet spaceship in 1975. It was so impressive to see how two highly complex systems involving people with different language and opposed values were able to accomplish such a maneuver. How was that possible? Well, They both had the science and the engineers, and I think most important of all, a minimum level of trust. So I'm looking forward for today's tonight's event, and I hand over to one of the founding members of Digital Switzerland, Mark Walder. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ambassador Wechsler, Ambassador Bidot, dear Doris, dear, I think it's fair to say, colleagues. Today is a good day. I sat where I belong in the media part when you had the press conference today. And I have to admit I was really proud. When we started this journey, Doris, it was in Geneva in 2019, and at that time, Federal Councillor Uli Maurer was the president of the Confederation. Some of you who are here today were already there in Geneva 2019. And there we were just an idea. It was just an idea. It wasn't even a startup yet. Then in 2020, we came here in this House of Switzerland, and Nicola, thank you that we have the honor to be here again. And we became a startup because we founded the so-called Swiss Digital Initiative, which is under the roof of this wonderful initiative, Digital Switzerland, that wants to make Switzerland a strong country for the future. We founded the Swiss Digital Initiative. And today, Doris Leuthard, together with Martin Vetterli, leaders out of the private sector, and Ambassador Wechsler, announced that we actually are getting traction. Meaning, the trust label is being implemented in private companies, big companies. I will name them, each one of them, so I will go through 20 names because it's important, because these are the 20 companies and institutions that believe in this idea that trustworthiness actually does make a difference. And so it's a very good day, and we will discuss, we will listen to what the trust label actually is. We will listen to people who think that this could, as I picked it up today, maybe become, and I switch into German because I don't know the word in English, an Exportschlager for Switzerland. Exportschlager. It's about the same like cheese or chocolate, but just in the digital space. And I would like to just start with those institutions who actually believe in this idea and who actually work very hard, what I think to have a competitive advantage, because it is a competitive advantage if you are a private organization or a multilateral organization and users or stakeholders can actually trust your services. So I would like to thank, but more so maybe congratulate the following 5, because these 5 have already implemented. It's Credit Suisse, it's Swiss Re, it's Swisscom, it's Credex, and it's People Week, which is an HR startup. But there's more in line queuing up to get the Swiss Digital Trust label, which is, by the way, Doris Leuthard mentioned it, the first global digital trust label. So the ones who are actually queuing up is WeFox. By the way, the founder, we will hear him later on. Julian Teike is here with us, one of the most spectacular startups in Europe in the past 10 years. UNICEF, so the first multilateral organization, but then also Coop, and I'll go through, UBS, Julius Baer, Kudelski, Booking.com, Cisco, Tresorit, Swiss Post, Atos, Draxenberg, and WiseKey. So these 20 actually are queuing up now to make a difference to their stakeholders and to their users. And with that, I would like to hand over to our wonderful president, I'm not handing over to the president yet, Doris. I'm handing over to a very special guest. It's Mitchell Baker. Mitchell Baker cannot be here, but she's joining us live from the US. Mitchell Baker is, as probably most of you know, the CEO of Mozilla and the chairwoman of the Mozilla Foundation. The title of the keynote of Mitchell, who is a true leader in terms of trust in the digital landscape. The keynote's name is Building Trust by Putting Communities and Principles First. And with that, Mitchell, thank you so much for taking part. You are live in the House of Switzerland now. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I wish I could be there in person. I do recall that day in 2019 when the idea started to take shape. And thank you for your leadership and for having me. Digital trust is challenging, but it's also an opportunity. We know that people respond instinctively sometimes. You meet someone, you trust them, or you don't. It's based on intangibles and has the whole history of human evolution behind it. And so now we're experiencing something different, where we see people over Zoom like this, increasingly in hybrid settings, even after the pandemic. And we've learned that remote engagement offers opportunities for many more people to participate. And so in this mixed new environment, as we look at trust and what creates trust, the digital realm offers opportunities as well as challenges. You know, trust is complex. It requires at least two categories, something being trustworthy and something being trusted. Those are interrelated, but different. One has a deep emotional component to it. And so in these things, community and principles are fundamental, both to the substance of what makes something trustworthy and to the emotional response of, is something trusted? So we have a fair amount of experience at that at Mozilla, of course, being community-based, having a long history in trust and security, both in making mistakes and in living up to the trust that people have placed in us. And so it has been quite wonderful to see the digital trust label emerge as an idea, and then as a foundation and a project, and then a community of experts working together to develop the substance, and now the label launched and companies engaging and using it. This is an activity that also relies on substance, community, and principles. And the strength of these is important in the launch and the development, but also in the long-term life of a project, because we need robust systems that enable trust and trustworthiness, even as we make mistakes. You know, the digital world is still early. It's changing fast. It will continue to change fast. It's possible that the pace of change will even pick up. And in a world like this, it is hard to be perfect, probably impossible to be perfect. And so we will make mistakes. So building that system that has the substance to be trustworthy and the communities and the principles to be trusted as well is an important piece for a robust and long-term system. And as I said, I've seen this in the work of the initiative and the trust label. But as I talk more here for a moment, I'm going to use Mozilla as an example. And I like to start with the harder problems and work backwards. And so I'll use Mozilla and some of the harder problems, which are, of course, making mistakes and being imperfect in the desire to be trustworthy and trusted. And of course, we see that regularly. You know, we build complex software, and there's no piece of software of the complexity of a browser that's perfect. They all have security vulnerabilities. And so over our history, it's been important to us to be trusted and trustworthy, even knowing that we are imperfect and that we make mistakes. And so as an example, how do we actually do that? Some of these things are hopefully useful in a broader sense. So how do we work to maintain trust and trustworthiness here? One, principle of openness, which is not always easy. You know, being public about your mistakes is not much fun, but we have it as a core principle. This also has a few different reasons. One, it allows for community understanding, to know what's going on and not to be in the dark. It, as a principle, it reinforces our desire to be open, because in order to be authentic, we've been clear about what's important. So we have the principle of openness, both for its own sake and because it enables community engagement. We have a principle of responsiveness. Now that might seem obvious when you know that there's a security flaw in your product. But in fact, the industry did not have universally high standards for being responsive. And so over the years, by being responsive and talking about it, we've worked to push the industry. Certainly, we know the ins and outs of browsers and how all the different browser companies respond, but also, you know, in the broader sense, to push a responsiveness. It can often be expensive and difficult and disruptive to respond to a security vulnerability. And so this principle of responsiveness is actually a deeper, stronger, harder thing than it might sound like. We have a principle of inclusion and participation. Again, to drive the authenticity and the shared responsibility for the work. As we're an open source project, that extends beyond employees to experts, but a principle of inclusion and participation that applies to an employee base is also powerful. And finally, we have a principle of excellence. We're not perfect. We'd like to be. We strive for excellence. And we are also quite public about the activities that we engage in to try and move forward. Everything from creating new programming languages for increased safety to the work and processes that we use ourselves. So we have a set of principles. Those principles are also intended to encourage community development and engagement and trust building. How do we live up to them? Well, first, having principles. You can't live up to them if you don't. Second, being public about them. Third, building a community that cares about them. And that certainly includes our employee base, making for a shared sense of responsibility. And that is building a system where it is hard for the leaders to go astray. You know, there's a lot of pressure on leaders, whether it's the market, you know, the publicity, sometimes there's personal pieces, there's lots of pressures. And all of us are struggling with dynamic tensions and balances and making hard decisions and trying to balance different things. And in those settings, I think it is not wise to rely on a single leader over a sustained period of time. You may be lucky and have a leader that maintains the integrity that she or he started out with, but there's lots out in the world that push us in different ways. And so having a community that makes it hard for the leader to do the wrong thing and easier for the leader to do the right thing is a system of long-term sustainability that we use at Mozilla. And I've seen that system, I won't say the name, but in one of the world, you know, great media organizations where the leader was sort of waylaid in public and kind of asked to do something. And the leader had his, you know, wits about him enough to leave some space and not commit fully, which was important because I watched the organization inside, you know, take the space the leader gave and live up to his word, but protect the organization and give the leader the tools, you know, and the conviction to bear the consequences of doing the right thing. And so building organizations and communities that understand principles and that are together sharing the responsibility for living up to them and living up to our values is really important. And so, as I mentioned, it is really exciting to see the trust label work with a large community of people who are engaged and where the work is not secretive, but is engaged and aimed at pulling people into understanding and developing and participating. And the last thing that I'll talk about is the experience in the market. Certainly, I live in a Silicon Valley consumer internet space, which is moving quickly and certainly is not, it certainly is not on the list of companies that have adopted the trust label so far. Cisco, as the exception there. And so we find that the market is a tricky setting. Consumers want safety and privacy and security, and also, the richness and power that the global network brings. And so if you can offer the same experience and it's better and safer, that's great. It's hard to do that currently. It's difficult to capture the economies of scale, the social networks, and to pull all the pieces together to create an experience, and that is radically different. Now, we think it's possible, and certainly Mozilla is set up incentive-wise, so that every last penny doesn't have to be generated. But that combination of market and financial return and consumer interest in the excitement of new things is something we're only just beginning to crack. But the positive thing is that we do see that consumers are interested, and when there are options and choices, we'll respond to them. And so we test this out in ways that are currently much smaller and less ambitious than the Trust Initiative, to start to build awareness and activity. Because sometimes consumers are lost and they feel like there is no choice, so there's really nothing that you can do. So for example, we have an experiment in this space. It's a product on its own. It's called Privacy Not Included, and it's a consumer guide to products. Publish it at Christmas and once at Valentine's Day, and it's designed to allow consumers to know that there actually are places where you have a choice. And the basic criteria for that are like baby steps compared to the overall trust label. Is there encryption? Do you do updates? Very, very basic things. But still, many in the industry aren't even doing that. And so we've been seeing increasing interest from consumers. We've been seeing that negative responses or negative articles in the Privacy Not Included guide get reaction. And so beginning to build at the grassroots level that sense that, I actually can do something. I can make a choice. And that element will be important as well. And so that community element of building in consumers and consumer choice as part of the market, so that when you're making an individual choice about your products and services, you've both got choices, but you've got the muscle memory and you've got the sense of efficacy that citizens can actually drive change in the market as well. And so I think that combination of new products and services, citizen awareness and choice and difference, and tools like the digital trust label on a global basis together can help us see not just the challenges of trust in the digital era, but also the enormous opportunities. And I'm delighted to be here as we all look forward to that together. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Mitchell Baker, I think one of the most trustworthy personalities in the digital space. And now, please welcome the woman who has been on top of the organization, on top of the foundation since the beginning. I know, Doris, you choose very wisely and carefully what mandates you take, but you did say, yes, I'm going to take over the presidency of the Swiss Digital Initiative, and therefore the trust label. Thank you so much for doing so. Thank you so much for your leadership, your experience, your network, your wiseness, and please tell us why actually you did so. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Do you know from your favorite app how secure your data are? Do you know if they use a fair algorithm? I don't know. I'm not a tech nerd. I just use them because it's so nice and comfortable. And I think most of our population does so. We heard from Mitchell, trust is very complex, and there's a need for more security, more safety, more data protection, and more transparency. Okay, this was 2 years ago, the beginning of our reflections. Well, okay, when it's becoming more and more important that trustworthiness is important and the users want to see that, leaders might consider trustworthiness as part of their business. We knew, well, we have in Switzerland excellent experts. We have to bring them together. We knew we have also audit partners who have some experience in labeling and certification. And we knew we had Ninian. Ninian was from the beginning the driving force. He had the contacts, and we found her activity, her dynamic guide on our foundation and our team. It would not be realistic that we have today this digital trust label. We did at the beginning some research because how we measure trust, what indicators create trust. Okay, in the digital world, it's even not possible to measure that so far because all our labeling certification authorities, they have an experience in the analog world. So we must go from scratch to invent all these indicators and how we can measure that the user can rely finally on our label. And I'm very proud that together with our expert label committee, who did a fantastic job, we found the right indicators, we found how to measure it, and we relied on existing standards. The new idea was to bring the different standards together because if you see labels, normally they rely on one standard. And we have different, in each sector, we have a standard which exists and which normally companies already refer to. We have 4 pillars which are very important. That's security, that's data protection, that's reliability, and fair user interaction. And these 4 pillars, we have in the backside 35 indicators who are controlled, who are audited, and then finally when you pass this exam, you get the label or you don't. It was for us very important that the funding of our label is independent. And I say it because it would have been an easy way that we find some companies, they give us money, and the label is totally commercial. We did not want it that. We wanted it's a Swiss label. We wanted also to use the international Geneva as a place to be. We wanted to put our universities in a good position. That's why all the money which contributed to the development of the trust label is public from Mercator Foundation, from universities, from the Confederation, or from SGS. This was for us very important, and we made it. Together, as Mark already mentioned, we have already roughly 20 companies who want to check an app or a service or a web page. And I'm very happy that it's not only Swiss ones. We already entered the European space. And this is for us very important because we think, well, it will begin in Switzerland, it will grow in Europe, and it will go international. Because as you heard from Mitchell, trust will be in the future also a value which is very important for companies, but most of all for us consumers. It looks like that. That's the digital trust label. But it's not only a label. You will see a company and a service who gets the label has also some kind of nutrition information. So you can go into the label and then you see also is Swisscom, is Credit Suisse, where have they already their weaknesses, although they got the label, or are they already top of top? I think everybody can improve and nobody will be perfect. Also, our label won't be perfect from the beginning. We will also have to develop. We will see if the 35 indicators are the right ones. We will see if from media to tourism to the financial sector, it works. But we are very pleased so far that the audit committee, the SGS, who made all this work for us, seems to be pleased with what happens. So let's start. We did it, the world's first digital trust label, And we did it in Switzerland. Here at the World Economic Forum in the Swiss House, we presented as a gift to the world. And I'm very proud that we can discuss this now. I would also thank Mark. He was, with Digital Switzerland, also a driving force behind the project. When we had some discussions also with the Label Expert Committee, because in the beginning they had over 100 indicators, and they say, my goodness, it's not possible. Please, you're expert, you're so clever, but a normal guy, a normal girl like me, we can't work with 100 criteria. So it was also a procedure, and Mark was already on the way to put it into practice and put some optimism in this project. So I'm now happy that we can go in a label discussion with all our partners and interesting people who contributed or who are users who made their first experience, because it's really for the user. It's a consumer label, and the company who will get the label says to the consumer, you can trust us. You can trust this service. It's labeled. So I'm keen to learn from, for example, from Moses, from Swiss Re, who already has some experience with our label. But I hand over to Mark, who prepared the panel and will introduce all the panelists.
Thank you, Doris. Thank you very much, Doris. Now, may I ask the panelists on stage? I will quickly introduce you. So first, please, Francesca Bosco. Francesca Bosco is the Chief of Strategy at the Cyber Peace Institute, but Francesco has also been a member of the expert committee. Then I would like to welcome on the panel Peter Brabeck, who is, among many other things, the president of Gesta, that has been mentioned before. Welcome, Peter. Thank you for being here. Then Moses Oyesekoba, who is the CEO of reinsurance, of the reinsurance part at Swiss Re, who is already working with the label. Thank you for being here, Moses. And please welcome also on stage Samir Chauhan. Samir, you are the director at the UN for international computing at the International Computing Center. I will try to moderate a little bit, but then we make it interactive. So maybe I would start with you, Francesca. Doris has said 35 criteria, and the expert committee was way longer than that. But then, of course, we have to make sure that it's trustworthy on one hand, but practical on the other hand. Can you give us a bit of an insight how difficult, complicated, but then maybe solution-oriented the work was?
Thank you so much for the question. And thanks to Doris, and yeah, big thanks to Niniane, because it's thanks to her that we made it all together. What I remember when we first started the discussion with Niniane, we started indeed from the research that Doris was mentioning. So for sure, we based, let's say, on existing knowledge and also on the different developments that were happening. So I think it was a very, let's say, thoughtful and humble approach, and that's what we need, saying, okay, what is that we don't know, and what we can learn from the others. And there was an initial phase of, let's say, hard research, also thanks to the different partners involved. And the second thing that I think it was very remarkable since the very beginning is one of the things that I'm, let's say, very much advocating for as a civil society member and representative is the co-design approach. Often, civil society organizations are asked for opinions, are asked for submitting, for example, consultation, and they are asked for submitting potential improvement of things that are already existing. Here, the approach was very different. It was like, since the very beginning, let's bring together a series of experts in their respective fields, coming from the economic sector, data scientists, legal experts, consumers, civil society representatives, and clearly private sector representatives, in trying to co-design something together that makes sense for people and that will be used by people. So another, I think, important, let's say, sort of like result that I would really highlight is also the effort that, despite the painful, can I say, 35, coming up with the list of 35 criteria, I think you indicated the 4 categories, but inside those categories there are 35 criteria. It was also being very careful in working in the communication efforts, in making it understandable in a language that people can understand and they would be encouraged, therefore. So it's not a barrier, it's indeed something that you would advocate for because, I mean, you are proud of having a digital trust label and also because you understand what it means. A practical example is, for example, in the security requirement, is the user clearly informed of the purpose and legal basis of processing? Is something that people can understand. It's not, let's say, too much technical, and it's something that at all level, and I mean, then I will turn it also to you, Moses, for your experience, but can be understood at the, let's say, at the C level in a company, but also by the employers, because you need to have all on board to build trust.
By the way, maybe you should, my experience is it's easier that the employees understand and more difficult that the CEOs actually understand, especially when it comes to digital skills. Francesca, thank you so much. Over to you, Moses. Swiss Re is one of the leaders now, is one of the front runners now. 2 questions. The first one is, you checked. Of course, trustworthiness is important, but still there's a process until you finally say, I do it. So how was that process, and what is the expected outcome, maybe, that you do? Swiss Re, as a global champion, went ahead and went into this process.
Yeah, thank you for the question, and I will start first by talking about the process, and then I talk about why it was important for us to be part of this overall initiative. The process was one, from our standpoint, that was quite collaborative, you know, which was, so we were part in sort of like bringing real life experience, talking about the issues we face, and went through that whole set of questions to make sure that the audit process reflected reality in the world, in terms of real world problems and not just purely academic in nature. You know, so for us, what was attractive was that this strong collaboration in making sure that the real issues were absolutely addressed. And from Swiss Re's perspective, the reason why something like this is super important is because it aligns very strongly, very heavily with our overall mission. At Swiss Re, we say our mission is to make the world more resilient. I know it's lofty to say that as a mission, but it's something we take extremely seriously. And the reality of that in terms of what it translates to is making sure that everybody has access to insurance products around the world. And in today's world, we know that there's significant gap between losses that occur, so economic losses, versus losses that are insured. You know, and the difference between that gap is people being able to have access to insurance products. So we know access, we know affordability, we know that awareness, we know transparency. These are all issues that prevent people from buying insurance. And something that gives them greater confidence to say they want to adopt and buy insurance is something that helps close that protection gap. And we know that digital technologies advances that significantly. But one key barrier to adopting digital technologies is how much trust you have. No different than somebody who I meet for the first time, either I connect with, as Mitchell said, or I don't. And quite frankly, I connect more with somebody who has been referred to me. You know, if my brother says, okay, Moses, this is somebody you should meet, in a way, I know that he's been vetted already by my brother, has, you know, he's responsible, he's fair, he's ethical, has all the qualities that I like. And I think the Swiss Digital Trust label does that. Right? It gives you a sense of a good introduction, trustworthiness, And this is one of the reasons why we felt it was important to be
One more question, very practical question. Now, Swiss Re is a huge company. You're leading the reinsurance part of this global leader. How difficult was it to push it into your organization? Was it just a total top-down approach and you said, look, guys, this is what we have to do? Or did you feel that there was a lot of acceptance bottom-up within the organization?
I think the problem statement was already there. So if you look, Swiss Re, we participate extensively in cyber-related and digital-related initiatives around the world. So we provide cyber insurance. And any one of you who picks up the newspaper every day, you see an incident somewhere around the world that creates, that erodes trust in the digital world, through the various incidents that happen. So these were things that were already in place and already in existence. And as I mentioned, also seeing that in certain products in certain areas around the world, we knew we were not getting the level of traction, especially the underserved communities and emerging countries. They were not getting traction because of awareness, because of access, and because of trust and transparency. So these were things that were already percolating at the bottom. So from our standpoint, when we came and said, okay, this is one way in which we can solve some of these problems, there was good and broad embrace. Now, we've rolled this out with one product, an automated underwriting solution in the life and health space. We call it Magnum Go. And over time, we will learn and we will roll it out across multiple products before we get to the full product set. One last point, if you don't mind, that I'll mention. Swiss Re, as you mentioned, I run the reinsurance business in Swiss Re. It's a B2B business, as opposed to a B2C business. And again, another reason why it was important for us to be part of the overall initiative, we knew we could be a replicator effect. If we introduce the label to multiple insurance companies around the entire world, it's much faster than each and every one of them trying to do it. So we had this catalyst effect as part of the overall process.
We do have your chairman here, Sergio Amotti is here as well, and this is interesting because at that time, Doris, when we launched it in Geneva, Sergio was already there in Geneva, but at that time, as CEO of UBS, so obviously Sergio very much stands for digital trust and reliability. My next question will go to you, Peter. As president of the GESTA, and I quote precisely what the GESTA is standing for, because I think it's super interesting and super important, and then my question. So GESTA is anticipating scientific breakthroughs and innovation which will affect our economies as well as our societies. I think GESTA has been founded 5 years ago, based in Geneva.
3 years ago.
3 years ago. How far are you at the moment? Tell us a little bit about the chances, opportunities, but also the difficulties you have with such a wonderful institution like GESTA.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. As a matter of fact, I cannot talk too much about the trust label, but I can tell you one thing, that when creating GESTA, and we created it from zero, like you started, and we started in 2019 also, the factor of trust was certainly the most important one to make it successful. So I can talk about trust. GESTA was created by the federal government. It was an initiative by the now president, Ignacio Cassis, and in his speech here at 2 o'clock, he referred several times to GESTA because he said it's part of the effort of the Swiss government in foreign relationships. They see it as a part of it, science and diplomacy. It was also co-sponsored, and it is co-sponsored by the Geneva governments, both the cantonal and the city. So it's an initiative which came from the public sector. And then afterwards, we were asked to create this public-private partnership and to try to find also private institutions. From the beginning, the question of trust was very important. And that was the reason why I clearly indicated that, especially in the first 3 years, we would not take money from private companies because of the trust level. You see, when I talk to you as chairman of GESTA, I have intrinsically a little bit more trust from you when I talk to you as a chairman of Nestle. Okay? So therefore, it was so important that when we started with Gesta, we did not allow neither commercial companies nor other countries or other governments than the Swiss government to participate in the financing of the efforts in order to have a clear, trustworthy base, a neutral, trustworthy base. So trust comes in here. Now, what are we doing? Basically, we have established two fora. One is a scientific forum, and the other one is a diplomatic forum. I was extremely happy to have two people who are here with us today, which is Joël Messon, the head of the Zurich ETH, and Martin Wetterli, and both of them accepted to become the chairman of the scientific forum. And again, I'm sure, based upon purely trust that the scientists of the world, all over the world, had in them, we were able to contact more than 4,000 scientists all over the world to find out what is cooking in the laboratories of the world, and to ask those scientists, tell us, what do you think is going to be the impact of your scientific breakthroughs in the next 5, 10, or 25 years? And we then afterwards summarized this into what we call the breakthrough radar. And those 4,000 people and the chairman of this scientific, they all did it without any remuneration. It was just based upon the trust that they had that this was something that was also of interest for them, because it never existed a document that would show you what are those breakthroughs which are going to have a major influence in your life in the future. So I'm extremely thankful to my two co-chairmen who are staying there for the extraordinary work they have been doing in order to achieve a document which we call the Gesta Scientific Breakthrough Radar, which is, by the way, of course, available. I have a copy over there. Otherwise, you'll find it in the thing. Now, the second part of it is that we then created this diplomatic forum. And again, I was happy I could engage or encourage the former UN representative here, Michael Müller, to be part of us and to assume this presidency. And now what we are doing, we are taking this radar, we are taking these scientific breakthroughs, and we are confronting it now in the diplomatic forum with the language and with the different situations of the political, the civil, and the civil society world. So that they are telling us now, well, if we want to take the best out of this, we have to create a framework, a political framework, that allows that, first of all, most people in the world, I'm not saying 100%, we are not always it's possible, but the majority of the people can take advantage of those breakthroughs. Because we should not forget, the Article 27 of the Human Rights Declaration says that everybody in the world has a right to participate in the creation and in the outcome of scientific investigations. The reality today is that most of these outcomes are in the hand of 3 or 4 of big companies or in the hand of 3 or 4 big states, both of them, one exploiting it for commercial considerations, and the other one, what I would call a neocolonialism of technology. And that is something that we have to prevent. If we had thought, and if we had had the Gesta 30 years ago, we would not have the concentration of social media like we have it today. And if we are looking forward, so this is one of the areas where we really want to help, that we establish a framework that allows that everybody in the world can participate in this breakthrough, scientific breakthrough. I will stop here. I think that's...
Peter, but one question, and this is almost, what unites us, because we do have the chance to work closely together with you as the Swiss Digital Initiative. How important is the fact that you, or both of us, are based in Geneva? Because you started with trust.
Yeah, I think it is absolutely. Look, we have discussed this very often. For us, it is absolutely clear Geneva is a unique place. You have, first of all, it is the center of the humanitarian multilateralism of the world. Okay, you have an innumerable amounts of international organization. It is the headquarters for thousands of NGOs, so civil societies. You have the best universities, and this is not just now. So you have a conglomeration where you have all of those things, all these pillars that Chester is based upon, are perfectly well represented in Geneva. And it also has the image of neutrality. And I'm saying over and over again, I think for somebody like Chester, Switzerland being neutral is extremely important. It increases the trustworthiness. I heard carefully about her talking about trustworthiness and trusty. So I thought she's absolutely right. The trustworthiness comes big part also from Geneva and from this independence. And we want to be an honest, open, transparent broker between science and diplomacy and politics.
Samir, thank you, Peter. My next question goes to you because this has been a wonderful bridge, basically, to you. Now, you provide, as the director, the digital services within a hugely complicated organization, highly sensitive. So the first question is, how do you actually do that? What are the values? What do you make sure that you deliver in a right trustworthiness way? Can you explain a little bit out of your daily or maybe strategic work within the UN?
Sure thing. And thank you for having me. And Peter, thank you. You actually eased the way for me to make some of the points I wanted to make, so really appreciate that. So yes, we support the entire UN system. So every UN agency you can think of, we support them in some way, shape, or form with their technology. And as you can imagine, in the last 5-6 years, especially since the pandemic, in the last 2 years, we've seen a massive trajectory of growth because the demand for tech has gone up. And we've seen the private sector step in and provide solutions. But for us to ensure trust, we have to be the ones who are safeguarding that trust. So we are the ones who are operating the technology. We are the ones who are vetting the technology in a lot of instances. So the board I'm accountable to is looking for us to take the lead in several instances to say, you should define where do we go next. Tell us what's coming next. How do we anticipate and plan for that next? So we're not looking like just 5, 10, 20, 25 years out. We're looking next year and the year after that. But there's an expectation of us now to say, find a way and find a way that fits with the values of the UN. Because we are part of the UN system. And to me, the biggest thing we have going for us since the UN was created 75 years ago is the moral authority we've been given by the world to say, you are neutral. And that level of trust that existed with, for example, the privileges and immunities we've been accorded by all the member states, and especially Switzerland, whether it's written down or not, extend into digital now. So we have to be that safeguard, the guardians of that trust in a lot of ways. So we have to make sure everything we build is secure, everything we build is trustworthy, or we can very quickly lose that trust. So for us, every day it's a big battle, to be very honest with you, to make sure that we are choosing the right technology, we are operating it effectively, and it's very challenging because, one, there's cybersecurity issues every day. We are getting attacked. When I say we, it's the broader system. So we have to make sure we are respectful of that and anticipating and tackling that. Second is everything new we build, we have to make sure it actually fits, it's fit for purpose. So it actually also addresses the global south. So we're not building it so that it only works in certain situations, in certain parts of the world, but it's technology that can truly scale up. So for me personally, one of the things we are very conscious of is how are we doing steps every day that bridge the digital divide. And a large part of that is building trustworthy solutions, scalable solutions. So to me, that's what we look at day in and day out, is those two factors.
Thank you, Samir. Let me open up and then get a bit of interaction for the next maybe 10 minutes. We have a very special guest here tonight, and we are very touched and especially touched. So Valeria, please join me here. So Valeria Yonan is the Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Digital Transformation of Ukraine. So it is a very special moment for us to have you here, and being in a ministry of digitization, digital transformation at this moment of war. Can you maybe start with the question or the thoughts around how important digital tools at the moment are to defend your country and your civilians?
Thank you, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you for the question. And maybe I will start with explaining a little bit the context. So before the war, the presidential program State in Smartphone had the biggest support of Ukrainians among other governmental initiatives. And this program is totally implemented by the Ministry of Digital Transformation of Ukraine, which is the youngest ministry and is a new ministry. We're only 2.5 years old. And before the war, we had 4 strategic goals, which were mainly about basic digital infrastructure, which is to make 100% of public services online, to cover all the country with an access to the internet, to teach people with digital literacy, and to develop the IT industry. And for that, we have developed an ecosystem of digital projects, which is called DIA, and which means in Ukrainian action. And this ecosystem has 5 different projects. The first one is a DIA app, which is used by 16 million of Ukrainians, and that is a great example of digital trust, by the way. So this app is about documents in smartphone and the most popular services in smartphone. By the way, Ukraine is the first country in the world where digital passports are complete analogs to paper and plastic documents. Then we have a state portal of public services, DIA, where we have lots of services, and also we have the fastest business registration in the world. Only in 10 minutes you can have your business in Ukraine. DIA City, which is a special tax and legal regime for IT industry. DIA Business, a program for the development of SMEs. DIA Digital Education, a big program of digital literacy, which covers different segments of target audience, including people of elegant age and scholars and kids. And we really had some great achievements before the war. And then, have you ever thought, what is digital trust in a real life during the wartime? It is about when you trust and you believe to reliable sources, you stay alive, or at least you might stay alive. And if not, for example, if you believe your Air Alert app, you have like a little bit more time to find the bomb shelter. So when the war started on the 24th of February, we had to adjust our work as the ministry very fast. And we really started to work as the fighting machine, as the war machine. We continued to develop services. For example, assistance to the army, the opportunity to transfer funds to the army. Then we have developed an e-support program, which is a special financial assistance to people from settlements where war actions were taking place. Then a special chatbot to inform about the dislocation of Russian troops and Russian technique. We've done a lot, and even an online game, which is called e-Bayraktar, to decrease a little bit the level of stress among the population. We also do a lot on digital blockade, and thanks to our Vice Prime Minister, Minister of Digital Transformation, Mikhail Fedorov, who appealed to tech giants and international companies, more than 500 companies have withdrawn or suspended their businesses from Russia. Of course, there are some negative cases. For example, a German company, SAP, who deceived us many times. They promised us to leave the Russian market, but they gave absolutely another command to their Russian office. And we think that today it is an unprecedented case. You can't do money on people's blood and on kids' blood. We do a lot on informational side and on disinformation. So we united the forces of international companies and media companies to make big media campaigns for Russians. We were hoping that they will go to the streets that they will start to protest, but as you all know, it didn't happen. The propaganda, the 20 years propaganda didn't go. However, we still are fighting, and we launched a DIA TV and DIA radio in our app with 24/7 truthful news to spread the information about what is really happening in Ukraine on a real-time basis. So we really did a lot, but for now, our biggest challenge is to win this war, and we put all of the resources and all our energy there. And thanks to European countries and thanks to all of you, we really feel your support. I hope that we will win very soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valeria. It's a very special thing to have you here among us. I would like to hand over the word to Julian Teike, because when Doris was having the press conference before, Julian was very clear about the chance that Europe has in terms of digital trust. We heard Mitchell Baker out of the Silicon Valley, not really the most trustworthy place at the moment. Julian, you were very clear. Now I have to quickly introduce again. Julian is the founder and CEO of WeFox. WeFox is one of the best funded, highest funded startups. It's not a startup anymore, it's a big operation already in Europe. So floor is yours, Julian. And you also said a sentence around you want to shape the startup industry here in Europe, that trust actually counts and is maybe even a competitive advantage.
Thank you for the floor. Thank you, everyone. Yes, I mean, America won the last 20 years. That's clear in terms of technology. China has been doing really well in the last 20 years. I think that both America and China have been built on a very different premise. In America, we have the hyper-capitalism, and what has been created is companies that do a lot, some even everything, for money. In China, we have companies that, have grown in a different system than Europe, based on different values. And I do believe that the opportunity that we have right now is to shape technology from Europe that will shape society globally. If we look at how the first people came to America, for example, there was absolutely no problem with cutting wood. There was enough wood when the first settlers came to America. At one point, there were so many people that there needed to be regulations. Not everybody could just cut wood anywhere he wanted. And it's the same with data. When these high-tech companies in America and China started, they could just cut as much wood as they wanted. And now we need regulations, especially when we look at the contextual data revolution. So not just me communicating with the internet, but 15 devices that are connected to me, collecting data in real time connected to the internet. So this will bring completely new challenges that require the responsibility of tech entrepreneurs. And that's why this initiative is such an important initiative. And as I said, this requires a movement. This requires tech entrepreneurs to take responsibility, tech entrepreneurs to also apply for the label and shape a new level of consciousness. I believe it's the right place, it's the right time, and it's a foundation for making Europe the winner in technology over the next 20 years. It's a true USP of Europe, and that's why we believe in it.
Thank you, Julian.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So dear colleagues, ambassadors, I think it's a big day for us. Doris, to all the people who helped, expert committee, the members of the foundation, Ninian, we can't thank you enough for the amazing work you have been doing. And I would just like to hand over to you now, Doris, to have a couple of final thoughts. And maybe I start with, what was the most difficult point during your presidency so far? Because as I said in the beginning, we are or were a startup. And you know where startups sometimes are, in the Death Valley. It's like you lose courage, no money. It's getting so difficult. What was the most difficult moment for you as president of the foundation?
I really think it was the moment when we had to tell the experts, it's enough now. Because I think they could work for 1-2 more years to go in more details, do more research, and like you said, to put together the civil society, consumer vision, the tech nerds. So this was already quite difficult for you as a team. And for us who got the feedback and all these indicators, we said, so that's it. So even when they think I'm an old woman who does nothing, nothing understands from these issues, okay, might be right, but I was the boss and decided that's it. This was quite difficult. But perhaps, once again, I think we heard this evening remarkable issues. We have also a common background from the UN high-level panel, because also the UN is in this transformation, how we come from the analog to the digital world when it comes to organization, governance, new architecture. Companies are a little bit faster. We heard that even in a war, the importance of all this data, of social media, and finally, trust. So I think what we can give really to the world is this label. It's only one little element, but it can make a change. Because I see also the differences between the US approach, the Chinese approach, and the UN. I would integrate UN because UN is value-based. And we are value-based. I personally think a society, even our planet, can't survive without values. Without values, we are dead. Dead as a society, dead as a global population. And we have 2 issues in the next 10 years. That's climate change, and that's all these digital issues. How we live together, how we communicate, how we can trust each other, apps, services, companies. Therefore, try and check the label. I think it's there now, it's up to you, and the price is reasonable.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Simon. Thank you so much, Daniel. Peter, it was an honor. Thank you so much. Francesca.